What's up, everybody? This is Nick Forker. Welcome back to Comics People. This is making the comic. All right, so we've already talked about steps 1 and 2, ideas and thumbnails. Today we're going to talk about pencils. So in our last video, I sketched this thing up, right? And it was good. I mean, it's fine. But with just a little bit more thought and effort, I turned it into this. I mean, I spent all of maybe 5 minutes doing that. So we went from this that we did in seconds to this that we did in minutes, and it just goes to show you the more time you spend, usually the better it comes out. I made a few changes, as you can see. This is what the thumbnail process is all about. I flipped this, right, so that we're gonna read left to right. I have the walk going left to right. And I just kind of have this interaction in the center now as the focal point of the page. So walking, distracted by a honk, almost steps in poo, nice try, close one, and then hurls a little epithet there in which our poop animates and jumps and lunges. So the left to right walk is because that's how we read. We read left to right, so why fight it, right? Why fight against it? And then it just creates a better flow when the thing's also jumping over from the left to the right. So there's 2 ways we can get this onto the page, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The first way is taking a blank piece of paper like so, and from start to finish, we're going to break it down on how to do this. Now, if you've made comics before, you don't really need to watch this video. This is more for the beginner. This is for somebody who's only maybe made one comic or has always wanted to make comics or kind of has been noodling around but isn't sure exactly how to get their ideas from the script or idea plot to a thumbnail to the page. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about pencils. Welcome back. All right, so first step I'm going to show you is just, what if I want to just scan this instead and print this out large? How do I do that? Well, let's talk about it. First things first, you just get yourself a nice flatbed scanner like this. You open it up, you get this art in there. You position it like so on the flatbed, close it down. Very nice. When you scan this thing, you want it to be, for every 300 DPI, it's gonna double in size. So at 300 DPI, it would just print out the same kind of index card size. At 600, it would double. At 1200, it'll quadruple. So I also want to make sure that I'm scanning color here. And then we're just going to do that at 1200 DPI and see what happens. All right, we got a nice scan in there, and we're going to go ahead and print it. But first, we need to make sure that this is the right size. So I'm going to select it all. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it into a document that I've already sized out at the right DPI, 300 DPI, 11 by 17. I'm just going to add it in there. And as you can see, it doesn't crop perfectly well. So I'm just going to transform it so that it fits to the constrained proportions of this document and just make sure that I have a little edge all the way around. So I want to make sure that it fits, but I also don't want to warp it too much. So I'm just going to stretch it in there and leave myself a little bit of a border all the way around so that when I print it out, it doesn't go off the page. You can't print borderless. Once that's done, I'm just going to go ahead and select it for print, and we're going to add this to the queue. Now I have a printer that can print very large, so I'm going to go in here and change my paper size to match tabloid or comics in this case. All right, once I select that, I'm going to save it, make sure that I have the right printer, the right amount of copies, the right layout position, and then I'm going to scale it to fit the media. It looks like it should fit. So we're going to go ahead and print one off. Yeah, here comes our pencils. Okay, that's it. Yeah, pencils done, printed, ready to go. And you can just ink out right on top of this. Imagine if you were doing a 100-page book, right? How much sense would it make to just do your pencils and thumbnail and then print them out, boom, you're done. And then you can just ink. I mean, the way, right? You can always work back into this, but imagine doing 100 pages of pencils that size. I mean, that is traditionally how you would do it. I mean, I still make books that way, but I'm saying like, this can offer an alternative if you're happy enough with your thumbnails and you're able to pencil in a way that, you know, is satisfactory. The one thing that I'll say that I did not do, which I normally would do, is switch this from being on the red spectrum to being cyan. So the reason why I would change all of this color to be cyan is because then when I go to scan the ink, the light from the scanner is a blue light and it will knock out all of the pencil. So I don't have to worry about any kind of like erasing or, you know, cleaning up the document in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, that's very important because this is quite messy, this drawing, and the style of this drawing is messy. But I just wanted to demonstrate how quick and easy it was to print it out, right? So that's an option that's available to you. If you do this way, just make sure to change this color to a cyan instead of a red. And I can show you how to do that in Photoshop. It really takes 2 seconds. Okay, but that aside for now, we're gonna talk about the traditional way to bring pencils to life on the page. I just love those red pencils. I draw with them all the time. But when I'm doing comics, I tend to stay with graphite and I like to use a 3H. Now, a lot of people will say that harder lead means you have to press harder and that makes grooves on the paper. There's a lot of like debate, you know, in personal preference, always when it comes to art tools. I find that graphite is what? Graphite is essentially, it's a mineral, right? It's mud. The more graphite you put down on the page, the more graphite you are responsible for removing later. So I use a 3H because it puts down very little graphite. I don't need big, thick lines of graphite on the page. I don't need to build the drawing on the page. All I need are some guidelines for my inking. I'm gonna do most of my drawing in the inking phase. So let's start with a 3H pencil and I'll show you how to break down a page. Okay, first up, you're gonna need a T-square. You're gonna need a level edge. Notice that I have it set to the edge of the desk here, a nice 90-degree angle, okay? Also, I use these black and white Alvin cutting mats for a reason. They have 1/2-inch squares all around, right? So when I wanna measure something, I can just tuck this into a corner of my Alvin mat, and as long as I'm following that line all the way down, I know I can access 1/2 inches whenever I need them, right? All the way up and down my page. Now, okay, let's talk about the dimensions of the page for a second. Traditional comics are done on 11 by 17 inch Bristol board, which means if we take 1/2 inch off of each side, and believe me, you will need to take 1/2 inch off of each side, this gives you some slug area, right? It gives you area to draw over. So in case you want borderless art, you can do that, right? You will always need a bleed and a trim area on your art. The number one mistake that I make is starting my work before I have a bleed and a trim. I'm gonna take 1/2 inch off of each side. And for our math whizzes out there, what started off as an 11 by 17 will now go to a 10 by 16. So we have a 10 by 16 live area where we're gonna have art, and anything that stretches beyond that area is going to be the bleed or the trim. Now you know you've done it right if the little squares that are created by the overlapping lines in your corners of your page are that square. The closer they are to square, the more, you know, more closely you've gotten your 90-degree angle right all the way around. Once I've ripped 1/2 inch off of each side, I'm gonna go ahead and look at my live area, and then something great is gonna happen. You have a border now, a 1/2 inch border all the way around for your bleed and your trim, but you then need to put on a 1/4 inch for your gutters. So one of the early mistakes is that the space between the panels, early on, we make them inconsistent size. So I'm asking you to make all of the spaces between your panel the same width. And in this case, we're gonna go with a 1/4 inch. Once you've taken a 1/4 inch off of each side, all the way around, you're gonna notice that your 11 by 17 that became 10 by 16 will now, you know, have a 1/4 inch shaved off of each side. But here's the thing. If I make my gutters a 1/4 inch, and I do from that 1/4 inch 5 inches, for each tier of a panel, right? Imagine that. Here's my 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. And now I'm gonna take this to 5 and make a little mark. Then I know I'm gonna leave myself another gutter, right? Here's my panel. I'm gonna leave myself another gutter. Just for the sake and ease of this, I'm gonna go back up to 5 and leave another 1/4 of an inch. Look what I've done here. I've got 1/4 of an inch here, right? 1/4 of an inch here, 1/4 of an inch here, and one here. And now I've taken off another inch, which means each one of my panel tiers, each level of the page here, top, middle, and bottom will each be 5 inches wide. That's really helpful because then I already know my math. Like I don't have to guess and have like one panel tier be a slipper taller or shorter than the other, right? So put in my 1/4 inch, yep, and keep that train rolling. Normally I would have this paper kind of situated, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm moving it around. So I have to reorient it. Okay, so here are my tiers now. I have 3 tiers on the page, each 5 inches. I know they're equal because of math. I'm gonna go ahead and put in the 1/4 inch on the sides now. Okay, and there you have it. I have gutters, I have bleed, I have the slug. So a little terminology for you. Bleed is this area in between. You know, anything beyond these panel borders will be in the bleed area. Anything inside these gutters will be the live area. And now I have to look at my thumbnail, right? So what does my thumbnail call for? For the sake of this video, we're doing 3 tiers. We have a top, we have a middle, and a bottom. And in the middle, we have 3 panels. So the top panel is 1 panel. This is a 5-panel page. So now I just need to divide this up into 3 even pieces. And so for anyone keeping score, how wide did it start? It started at 11. We ripped a 1/2 inch off of each side down to 10. And then another 1/4 inch off of each side down another 1/2. So it's 9.5 wide. And if each panel border now is going to be another 1/4 of an inch, then we're going to remove each another 1/2, which means each of our panels will be 3 inches. So good to know, right? 3 inches, 3 inches with 2 1/4 inch panel borders, and that will get us there. Now, sometimes I just rip it down, but sometimes I like to measure it on both sides so I can just match the lines up, and then I don't have to worry too much about whether my T-square is 90 degrees because I know that these are in the same place. So then I'll just rip this down and get those lines up. And that's really how it should be going when you're dividing up your panel borders. Okay, so here we have it. We have our 5-panel page, and that's how you prep a page for comics. Okay, next up we just need to figure out what shapes are where and how they divide up the page. So we can see here by our marks that our page middle, right, is such that this character almost takes up 1/2 the page. And then this sideline composition here kind of comes into the middle as well. So we can lay in that as our main kind of identifiers. This character taking up almost 1/2 the page, 1/3 of it with the body, and another bit there with the arm. So we'll lay that in first, and then we'll start to lay in the background in relative proportion. And it really is just all about relative proportion. So let's get that started. So I'm just gonna keep my thumbnails handy as I try to lay in this shape. One thing that I'm doing is I will always kind of pay attention for tangents. I want to avoid a tangent. So a tangent is when 2 separate shapes, 2 parts of different things, end on the same exact line. And when that happens, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance that removes the viewer from the picture. Now, my pencil might not be the darkest thing in the world, but again, I don't need my pencils to be dark. I just need them to show me where to make the marks for the inks. And you know, I'm not pressing hard at all. So I'm not creating grooves in my paper. And I actually find that less graphite on the paper is helpful when inking. I think I've got this proportion quite wrong, meaning like I'm drawing everything much bigger than it should be, but that doesn't matter. I'm just going to continue. I'll just bump this thing over and bring it in wherever. That's the beauty about cartoons, is that they're not real. They're only meant to represent reality. They do not have to adhere to its rules. And in fact, that's kind of the joy of cartooning, is breaking the rules of reality. Okay, so we have our character. He's kind of roughed in there. Maybe they'll have some dialogue, I'm not sure. But we can put a dialogue balloon in there. Just kind of figure out where that might go. They say the tail of the balloon should always point right at the mouth. My character doesn't have a mouth, but we can do our best, our level best. When I'm making a tail, I just kind of swipe. I use like a windshield wiper motion like this. When I'm doing a circle, I kind of go around in the air and then land the plane, so to speak. So I'm making my circle motion in the air, slowly lowering my hand down like the needle of a record, lowering the pencil to the very bottom at the last minute. I find that you're going to make your straightest lines when you pull them directly back towards your navel. So how you square up to the drawing table really does matter. And then I'm just going to add in some background. We need the street in here, so I can just make myself an artificial horizon, which actually the horizon would be like back here. Remember what they say: if the horizon's at the top, it's interesting. If the horizon's at the bottom, it's interesting. If the horizon's right in the middle, it's boring. You might remember that David Lynch scene, which allegedly was the dialogue taken from a story about a meeting that Steven Spielberg had when he was just starting. Okay, so getting into this, I'm just gonna add in some details, and this is what penciling is all about, roughing in the shapes. Again, I don't really care what my drawing is looking like at this stage, as long as it gives me enough room and creates clear outlines for my inking phase. You only need to draw as much as you need to remember what you want to put where. And when you're penciling, you're just making sure that all the hard work that you put into the thumbnail phase about shapes and proportions is coming to life in a real way. I absolutely loathe cars. I loathe automobiles of all kinds. Trucks, cars, motorcycles. I loathe them. I wish they did not exist. There's not a single truck, car, motorcycle, or other motor vehicle that I think deserves to exist. I think they should all be replaced by silent trains. Okay, and such, I don't want to draw them. Fuck cars, I hate them. So whatever, anyway. But they're everywhere, seemingly ubiquitous, and thanks to the greedy auto manufacturing lobbies, we are inured to them, hopelessly indentured to them, subjugated by them. Okay, so I put in most of the details here. Let me pick this up and see if it makes sense a little cleaner. So you can see, just like big shapes, I don't need to put the details in because I know where everything is going to go. All right, next up we need to put our characters in here. Again, circle, lower it down like a record needle. And that's how I get my circles. So one thing I noticed here is that we have 1, 2, 3 characters, all circular shapes. I mean, it's the same character, but you know what I mean. 3 forms. And we're just trying to get in these major, big things. I don't mind this panel break here. It kind of is fun because it creates almost like a walk cycle. And I could probably play that out a little stronger if I really want to get into this. But what you're gonna notice is that in making comics, it's like diminishing returns, right? It like can take you all day to make a comic page. How long does it take you to read a comics page? So if you're just writing and drawing all your comics by yourself, which most of us are, it takes quite a bit of time. And so I'm going to try to expedite that by drawing this as quickly as possible. I think there's something to having a character that you love to draw and having a character that you can draw quickly and having those be the same character. Now I've done something here in the thumbnail that I don't think you should ever do, which is I put the foot on the line of the panel. That's bad. It's bad manners, bad comics manners. You don't want to put your foot, that's like that tangent we were talking about, right? You don't want to put the foot on the bottom of the panel unless you're like a master and you know what you're doing. You also don't want to cut off your character at the joints. I was told, you know, figure out a different way to crop your character. Don't do it at the joints. The reason I was given is that it disempowers the character. Cutting them off at the knees, especially bad, right? So we're gonna say this gets a mid-calf and we get out of that. And here, we're gonna draw the star of the show. Poopity doopity. All right, almost steps in poop. We gotta get the turn. Get the honk. Honk honk action movie. All right. Notice how I just rough in shapes with circles, spheres, cylinders, etc. You're always just kind of like roughing in a bold shape first before you do any drawing, just to make sure that it positions well and creates the space you need to articulate the form. You might say easier said than done, but it's simple once you learn some like basic shorthand. And that basic shorthand is arms and legs are cylinders. Joints are spheres. Hands are cubes. That's it. It takes a lot of pressure off. Okay, next up, let's see. We're just working in our fourth panel here. We're gonna make it angry. You gotta have like a little fly too, I think. Where there's poop, there's flies, right? Okay, there's our second row of panels now. I think pretty close to the original. Okay, let's get in on that third panel tier now at the bottom. Our kind of joke sight gag landing here with a giant poop. So one thing I noticed that about the thumbnail that I wanted to change was that this character in the bottom here is maybe a little too big. When I did this version, the smaller character kind of sells the joke more, or at least it feels like they're being overwhelmed by like a giant wave of poop. Whereas this is kind of medium, so it's not as funny. And maybe I will make the proportions more like this. So we go from our initial idea, making it more dynamic, rendering it more, but is it better? We do get a nice little expression from the character there. So we're gonna combine all three things that work. We're gonna take the kind of still-eyed surprise, the proportion, and the articulation, and we're gonna make that all happen in our last panel. So the first thing we can do is block out a little area for our character to live, and then we want to make sure we get the iconic kind of like poop, you know, form, but then give it enough area to be springy and jumping. And then I just really want to get this like pretty curly Q frozen yogurt. I bet you'll never eat frozen yogurt without thinking of me. But this like frozen yogurt curly Q of poop on the top. So the proportion's pretty good. I don't know if the joke works. I don't know if there's enough room to really make it look like it's leaping. Like, would it be better if we saw where it was leaping from? Maybe. I have this theory about drawing tables. You should be able to erase without the table wobbling. If you erase and your table wobbles, it's not a good table for drawing. That's what I believe. Most tables are pretty flimsy, honestly. A good solid table is hard to find. They don't make them. They make them, but they're very expensive, right? Part of me wants to drive back to my parents and get my grandfather's drafting table, which had a massive iron like base, like a clawfoot tub. Okay, let's give it some tracers, and maybe that'll help. And then let's make it spring up off the ground and give it a little point of origin. I think that'll help. And then yeah, we're just gonna need more lines. Okay, that's cool. I'll just put in some details here. All right, there you have it. We went from thumbnail to pencil. And this is about as much penciling as I'll ever do, because almost all my drawing is done in the ink phase. I probably said that like 5 times already. Pencils from thumbnails, printing one out. Which do we think is better? When I put them side by side, I mean, obviously you can see the red side better. This will be easier to clean up because I forgot to go cyan here. The red works on camera though, it's really nice. I should just do a full comic in pencil, honestly. But yeah, I like this. This is really nice. I don't know which is better necessarily. I think we solve some issues in the pencil process that I think are very helpful. This looks way more like a walk cycle. And in fact, I could add like little lines of motion throughout in the background, right? Now I'm just putting these light lines over everything, and then I can add the motion lines. Now that I have these like frame lines, I can add more motion lines where I think it makes sense to, once I get the figures inked in. Or I could leave them off entirely, it really doesn't matter. But it does help to kind of like give a pace. Makes it look like he's really rushing around. So just some through lines of action here that we can either use or leave. It really just doesn't matter at all. So you can go either way. You can print out your pages like this. They also, that, you know, is one way to do it. I would give yourself a little more of a border. You're gonna lose about a ½ inch on any side. Or you can draw by penciling them one at a time. I think I prefer this method usually. There are exceptions that I'll use the other, but this is nice, especially for a page you don't have fully solid. Like this was a quick gestural sketch. If I spent more time on it, maybe I would, you know, if it's penciled in perfectly, you'll know it when you see it. All right, but this looks really good, and join us next time when we ink this page. All right, this has been Nick Forker for Comics People. Check out our Patreon. We'll be at New York Comic Con doing commissions the Comics People way. Next up, making a comic, inks. We're gonna ink this baby, and I'm gonna show you kind of my way into inks and some of the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. All right, until next time, see ya.